Hey everyone, so I promised to come today, it's Sunday, to do our Sunday planning ritual that is so fundamental to my mitigating burnout and my mitigating the extra stress that I don't need. Now you can probably hear from my voice that I actually have a cold, so I'm gonna keep this one super short. I'm gonna keep my own process super short this week because it's gonna be actually pretty simple. It's gonna require that this week I do as little as possible so that I can get myself well again and move all of my important priorities forward. But what I want to talk about first is if you want to go to the link in our bio and grab our burnout mitigation tool. It's a really simple kind of few page document that walks you through different phases of how you can do so. But the second phase, if you will, I think it's the third tip, is about decreasing demand. I think this is probably one of the most challenging recommendations for a lot of people. It's challenging both because they actually are responsible for a lot of things, but it's also emotionally and mentally challenging because it's really hard to let go of everything that's on our plates. I think it's probably thirdly challenging right now for folks who are like, this is the most annoying recommendation in the world because I have too much to do and all of it's important, like remote learning for my kids, my job, cleaning up our house, what have you. And I absolutely agree with that. I hear it and understand it. And I'm still going to encourage you to go through this process of considering, is there anything that you can let go in this week in particular? Now, the burnout tool is going to talk about all of the different ways you can think about doing less. So first and foremost, it's thinking through like, what is on your plate? What are you responsible for that you actually enjoy doing and that brings you joy? Because those things should stay on your plate if you can figure out how to have time for them. Then it's going to talk about, well, what do you need to stop doing for right now? What do you need to do differently? So maybe you aren't dedicating as much time or as much mental capacity to something, but it'll get done nonetheless. And then the big one is, what do you need to delegate? Do you need to delegate to someone on your team? Do you need to bring in someone in your community to support you? Is this a conversation that you need to have with a partner, if that's relevant to you, about what they can be doing in order to share responsibility in your home? It's a really great kind of exercise for you to go through. And what I do here is I really think about on Sundays, how I'm scheduling myself, and is there anything on my calendar that could go away if I'm starting to feel like there's too much to do and I just know it's going to get hairy and there's like no reason to set myself up for failure. So here's what I normally do on Sunday. At some point in the evening, right around now, I'll go into my calendar and I make sure that I have scheduled myself first. Now, this was the first tip in our burnout tool. It is so important to put yourself on your calendar first because, one, no one else is putting you on their calendar first. And two, you will not ever finish everything on your to-do list. So we cannot keep saying, I'll get to my workout or I'll get to my morning meditation or I'll get to my yoga when I get everything done. It's just not going to happen. So instead, the shift here is to put yourself first. Now for me, I do this normally a couple of weeks in advance because I need that time blocked so that when I am scheduling calls and project planning, I know well into the future that I am on my calendar first. But if you have not scheduled yourself first for this week, that is my recommendation. I have my calendar right here in front of me on my computer. I've opened it up with a view for all 5 work days, and I've already checked the weather. So I know when I can get outside and when I can exercise. That's what scheduling myself first for me looks like first, is when can I get outside and when can I do some exercise? Because that is fundamental for me right now in how I am processing stress and how I'm just getting my heart going and taking care of myself. So the first step is to go in and find at least 30 minutes of time that gets your body moving in a way that you would look forward to. Yoga class online, a dance class, going on a walk outside, check the weather and get that on your calendar. It has now, in being on your calendar, become a non-negotiable commitment to yourself. And it's going to be harder for you to not do it because it's there. And it's going to be harder to move because you're going to have to start negotiating with yourself. The second thing that I'm going to say is take as many decisions out of your week as possible. For a lot of people, you may have yet decided when and exactly how you're going to go ahead and vote on Tuesday. Go ahead and set that time in your calendar and plan to be in lines at the polls for the right period of time so that you can be sure that's something that you're doing with intention that is not, really stressing you out in the moment, because Tuesday is going to be stressful for a lot of reasons anyway. The other thing about taking decisions out of your day that I like to do is, this might sound silly and unnecessary, but I just kind of in my mind decide, what am I going to have for lunch every day? I kind of look through the refrigerator, get a sense of what's going on. It's one less decision I have to make in the middle of the day. I sometimes decide, my husband's actually the cook in our house, so he's the one who's pretty much deciding, what we're having for dinner, meal planning, all of that, but I might check in with him about that as well. I'm trying to limit the number of times I feel kind of caught not having a plan moving forward when it's really important that I do. And then to the point of, I just mentioned my husband, if you are living with someone in your home, or if you're raising kids in partnership with someone, or there's another adult in your sphere that you are doing this thing called life with, I highly encourage that you sit down with them and do your weekly scheduling together. Compare notes on how each other's weeks are looking, just any decisions that can be made together, ensuring that both parties understand what each one is responsible for. And when I say responsible, I mean fully and completely for whatever projects you've decided to own. And share the burnout tool with them. They might find it interesting too, and it'll create a common language and a common understanding between you. So that is generally what I do. I sit down, it's 10 minutes, I schedule myself first, I take some decisions out of my day, I be sure I've lined up with my husband around certain decisions, and then I have my container. Now I have my container of all of the things that I could be doing during this week. The last thing I'll say is I try to decrease demand on myself in moments of peak stress as much as possible. So as I look ahead to the week ahead, I'm asking myself, is it realistic to get done everything I've put on the calendar? Last week is a great example of where I overbooked myself. I knew on Sunday night that Friday morning I was going to get sick, and here we are. I learned that lesson, and this week is actually pretty clear. It's pretty open, so I can focus in on some big projects, do some deep thinking work. And so really all I need to shave off this week is probably 15 minutes from what's supposed to be an hour-long meeting that I'm looking at right now, and I'm like, we don't need an hour. We don't need an hour. And I can give 15 minutes back to that person, 15 minutes back to myself, and that's going to make me feel better about it. All right. The last thing I want to say is we're going into an election in the United States this week. It is very likely to, I don't know if it's very likely, I'm not a pollster, but my chances that things are to be decided and well known, by Wednesday morning, probably pretty low, just given the number of ballots that need to be counted, and it's a different year. And I think we have learned a lot as leaders and as managers about how important it is that we set the container for our teams and that we show up in a way that is thoughtful and intentional in moments where there could be a lot of conversation, there could be miscommunication. I'm just basically flagging for you that I think that if you lead a team, and really for anybody, how we show up this week is going to be super important in all the communities that we exist in. So I'm actually going to encourage you to share the Burnout Tool sign-up form with your team if you want to, because while it's really framed for people who are generally trying to mitigate burnout in a general circumstance, and it certainly is more targeted towards parents, the ideas are the same. People are going to really need to schedule themselves first this week. They really are. They're going to need to be sure that they are processing stress in the way that we know it needs to be processed, which is with physical activity and connection with other people. Physical activity and connection with other people. So you want to be sure folks are getting out and exercise. You want to be sure that you're available to them as a colleague and as a manager. You also want to be sure that you're not forcing conversations on people that they're not necessarily inclined to have. And the number one tip I'm going to give you is go ahead and ask your HR business partner if you have one, or someone on the talent team if they have any guidance for you in how they kind of, as an organization, want you to approach this, but that's just your first step. Give people the space to schedule themselves first. And then be sure that you and others that you know are encouraged to get their stress out in ways that are physical and in connecting with other people. And then thirdly, I would encourage you to decrease demand as much as you can. People are probably going to be pretty distracted on Tuesday, depending on how things are playing out with clarity of where the election results are. There might be considerable distraction and potential stress on Wednesday through the rest of the week. So I'm going to post a few more resources that I have come across that are great in general, and additional thoughts on how to manage that in the conversation and bringing team around it. But my first recommendation for you is to go to your talent leadership teams or to your senior leadership team and see if there's anything they want you to consider. And of course, if there's anything that you want to talk about, you can always send us a note and we are more than happy to chat with you about it. So thank you for listening to my groggy, cold-laden voice, brought to you by a week last week that was overfilled with demand. You learn, you live and learn, and you learn and learn again. I'm wishing everybody a really safe, a really thoughtful, a really productive week as much as possible. Determine that as you need to. But remember that taking care of yourself first and decreasing demand are key ways that you're going to mitigate that burnout and you're going to be able to process stress. Be well.